In the summer of 1943, at Camp Crossville in Tennessee, a German soldier stared in fascination at the bubbling brown liquid inside a glass bottle. After spending 2 brutal years fighting across North Africa, surviving on hard biscuits and bitter ersatz coffee, he had never encountered anything remotely like it. This sweet, fizzy drink called Coca-Cola seemed unreal, almost magical. It cost only 5 cents at the prison camp canteen, exactly the amount American guards casually explained that children across the United States paid from their pocket money. Throughout American prison camps that year, 371,683 German prisoners of war would encounter a reality completely at odds with everything Nazi propaganda had taught them about the United States. They discovered a country where ice cream was an ordinary dessert, where soft drinks were consumed daily, and where candy bars were so plentiful that guards handed them out casually. These simple pleasures, foods many German children had never even tasted, dismantled Nazi ideology more effectively than any official re-education campaign. The arithmetic of abundance revealed itself through sugar, chocolate, carbonation, and frozen desserts, exposing an industrial capacity so overwhelming that German wartime deprivation no longer seemed noble or heroic, only unnecessary. What began as disbelief over American treats gradually evolved into a profound psychological transformation. The collapse of the Afrika Korps in Tunisia during May 1943 delivered roughly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers into Allied captivity. These battle-hardened desert veterans, who had fought under Rommel's command and driven British forces back toward Egypt, fully expected brutal treatment as prisoners. Nazi propaganda had warned them relentlessly about American cruelty, starvation, and revenge. Yet almost immediately after surrendering, they were introduced to American field rations. These K-rations, often mocked by American soldiers themselves, appeared luxurious to exhausted German troops. Inside were crackers, processed cheese, chocolate, fruit bars, sugar tablets, instant coffee, and cigarettes. Men who had endured months of inadequate supplies treated these emergency rations like banquet meals. Military documentation from North African processing centers records that prisoners received pancakes covered in syrup, fresh eggs, and milk, foods that had virtually disappeared from German military diets years earlier. The systematic practice of feeding enemy soldiers better than their own army had done began immediately, although the full psychological consequences would only emerge later. One German officer later told the International Red Cross, "We expected imprisonment to mean hunger. Instead, the Americans fed us better than Germany did." That confusion about American resources became the beginning of our education. The Atlantic crossings aboard Liberty ships during the summer of 1943 provided an even deeper lesson in American abundance. These vessels, mass-produced at astonishing speed, one completed roughly every 42 hours at the peak of wartime production, transported as many as 30,000 prisoners per month to the United States. Naval records show that the rations provided to prisoners matched or sometimes exceeded those given to regular crew members, approximately 3,500 calories per day including fresh bread, meat, vegetables, and coffee served with sugar and milk. Unlike most German transport vessels, American ships possessed modern refrigeration systems capable of preserving fresh food during the entire 2-week voyage. Most shocking of all, surviving records confirm that prisoners were occasionally served ice cream while crossing the Atlantic. The logbook of the USS General M.B. Stewart from July 1943 specifically notes that prisoners received ice cream on July 4 using the vessel's onboard ice cream machine, capable of producing 10 gallons at a time. For men who had not seen ice cream since before the war, eating frozen dessert in the middle of the ocean shattered everything they believed possible. When transport ships arrived at ports such as Norfolk or Newport News, German prisoners confronted an America Nazi propaganda had insisted could not exist. The Norfolk Naval Base alone covered more than 4,300 acres and processed more cargo daily than many major German ports handled in an entire week. In the dockside exchanges, stores intended for workers and servicemen, prisoners caught sight of shelves overflowing with candy bars manufactured by companies like Hershey, Mars, and Nestle. Military purchasing records from 1943 reveal that these exchanges stocked dozens of different candy varieties, usually sold for 5 cents apiece, the same price paid everywhere else in America. The train rides inland delivered further surprises. Rather than being crammed into livestock cars as was common throughout Europe, German prisoners traveled in regular passenger coaches. Dining cars served complete meals. Surviving menus from July 1943 list fried chicken, vegetables, pie, and coffee. Prisoners slowly realized this treatment was not extraordinary hospitality, but simply ordinary American rail service. The prison camps themselves exceeded Geneva Convention standards in ways prisoners found difficult to comprehend. Camp Crossville in Tennessee, representative of many larger facilities, provided electricity, hot water, indoor plumbing, and heated barracks. Yet the Camp PX stores produced the greatest shock of all. Quartermaster archives reveal that camp exchanges routinely stocked Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, various candies and chocolate bars, fresh fruit, snacks, cigarettes, tobacco, and even low-alcohol beer. Ice cream was available in camps equipped with proper refrigeration. Prisoners earned 80 cents per day for labor, later increased to $1. Since both Coca-Cola and candy bars cost only 5 cents, a single day's wages could purchase 16 separate treats, quantities beyond imagination for most Germans, where such items were rare luxuries requiring personal connections. Coca-Cola itself became the ultimate symbol of American industrial democracy. Company archives show that 5 billion bottles were produced during 1943 alone. Military agreements guaranteed that American servicemen everywhere in the world could buy Coca-Cola for 5 cents, an arrangement requiring enormous logistical coordination. German prisoners quickly realized this drink, unfamiliar to many before capture, was absolutely everywhere in the United States. Deliveries arrived regularly at every prison camp. While assigned to labor details, prisoners saw vending machines and coolers at gas stations, schools, factories, and shops. Americans from every social class drank it casually, sometimes throwing away half-finished bottles without concern. Technically minded prisoners were stunned by the consistency. Coca-Cola tasted exactly the same in Texas as it did in Maine, a degree of industrial standardization German manufacturing had never achieved. The syrup concentrate produced in Atlanta and distributed nationwide to bottling facilities demonstrated organizational coordination that contradicted Nazi claims about American disorder and inefficiency. Coca-Cola archives confirm that many prison camps received between 200 and 300 cases weekly, each containing 24 bottles. Camp Hearn, Texas alone reportedly consumed roughly 7,000 bottles every week during the summer of 1943. Ice cream appeared even more unbelievable. Army documentation confirms that camps possessing refrigeration regularly served ice cream during summer months. The military considered frozen desserts important for morale, so important that specialized ice cream ships were eventually built for the Pacific Fleet. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, Independence Day celebrations in July 1943 included ice cream produced on-site. Prisoners watched hand-cranked freezers turning cream, sugar, salt, and ice into gallons of dessert. The effortless use of resources Germans considered precious, ice during summer, cream, sugar devoted purely to entertainment food, represented priorities they could barely understand. By 1944, many camps possessed electric ice cream makers. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and butter pecan varieties were routinely available, surpassing what many German ice cream parlors had offered before the war. Ice cream sandwiches, bars, and cups sold for 10 cents. Procurement records show that larger camps ordered between 50 and 100 gallons weekly during summer seasons. Availability varied depending on climate and location, but prisoners repeatedly experienced this frozen luxury that had vanished entirely from German civilian life. Sugar consumption within American prison camps carried especially powerful psychological impact. In Germany, sugar remained strictly rationed, with civilians receiving approximately 280 grams monthly when supplies existed at all. In contrast, sugar bowls sat openly on dining tables inside American camps, available without restriction. Quartermaster records from 1943 through 1945 show camps receiving 100-pound sacks of refined sugar every week. Camp bakeries used it generously. Cakes, pies, cookies, sweetened cereals, desserts, tea, and coffee appeared regularly. One incident at Camp Aliceville, Alabama, illustrates the contrast vividly. During humid weather in August 1943, several hundred pounds of sugar hardened and became difficult to use. Instead of salvaging it carefully, as Germans certainly would have done, kitchen staff simply discarded the supply and ordered replacements. German prisoners assigned to kitchen duty reportedly reacted with visible distress at such waste. American chocolate consumption revealed another level of democratic abundance. Companies like Hershey, Mars, and Nestle produced millions of bars monthly even during wartime restrictions. The U.S. military alone purchased 380 million pounds of chocolate products throughout the war. Camp exchanges carried multiple varieties of candy and chocolate bars priced between 5 and 10 cents. Prisoners discovered Americans casually debated brand preferences, choosing among options rather than simply accepting whatever was available. Monthly Red Cross packages distributed to prisoners often contained chocolate bars, instant coffee, crackers, canned meat, cheese, soap, and cigarettes. These supplemental packages frequently surpassed what ordinary German civilians received as standard rations. Thanksgiving 1943 introduced German prisoners to a uniquely American display of national abundance. Army records confirm that every prison camp served traditional holiday meals consisting of roast turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, vegetables, pumpkin pie, coffee, and milk. Coordinating turkey dinners simultaneously for hundreds of thousands of prisoners and millions of American servicemen worldwide demonstrated organizational capacity on a scale Germany could not match. Most strikingly, German prisoners ate exactly the same meals as American soldiers, contradicting Nazi racial ideology regarding hierarchy and worth. Christmas of 1943 brought another shock: generosity from ordinary American civilians. Churches, community groups, and private citizens mailed gifts to enemy prisoners. The American Friends Service Committee alone distributed roughly 50,000 Christmas packages containing cookies, candy, toiletries, books, games, cigarettes, and writing supplies. Communities near camps often contributed additional gifts. Residents of Tonkawa, Oklahoma delivered homemade treats to Camp Tonkawa. Church groups in Hearne, Texas brought cookies and candy to prisoners there. This spontaneous kindness toward enemy soldiers deeply undermined Nazi assumptions about American weakness and cruelty. Americans whose own relatives were fighting Germany nevertheless chose charity instead of revenge. As labor shortages intensified during the war, German prisoners increasingly worked outside camp grounds, gaining first-hand exposure to American agricultural and industrial production. By 1944, around 100,000 prisoners labored in farming and food processing industries. In Michigan orchards they harvested cherries destined for maraschino production, decorative toppings for ice cream sundaes. The sheer scale astonished them. Single orchards produced enormous quantities of fruit for purely decorative purposes. At canneries, prisoners observed edible produce discarded due to minor blemishes or irregular sizes. Del Monte records from 1944 show that around 15% of fruit was rejected for cosmetic imperfections and frequently diverted to animal feed. Sugar beet processing facilities in Colorado and Nebraska demonstrated agricultural mechanization beyond anything Germany possessed. Individual American farms produced more sugar beets than entire German regions. Prisoners learned that combined American cane and beet sugar production approached 7 million tons annually, explaining the casual abundance surrounding them. German prisoners working near schools witnessed early school lunch programs providing children with hot meals containing milk, vegetables, and protein. Fresh milk deliveries to schools particularly impressed observers, since Germany struggled even to supply military units consistently. Some schools even sold ice cream to students. The sight of children casually purchasing frozen desserts while German children endured hunger left lasting impressions on prisoners. When minimum security prisoners occasionally ate at roadside diners under supervision, they encountered yet another example of democratic abundance. Menus offered food that would have been considered luxury cuisine in Germany, yet ordinary Americans purchased it routinely. Surviving price lists from 1944 show hamburgers costing 25 cents, pie 15 cents, Coca-Cola 5 cents, ice cream sundaes 25 cents, and complete dinners around 70 cents. Factory workers and businessmen sat side by side eating identical meals served by the same waitress for the same price, a social equality fundamentally opposed to German hierarchy. As prisoners gained access to American newspapers and magazines, they encountered production statistics dwarfing German output. By 1944, the United States produced roughly 7 million tons of sugar annually, over 500 million gallons of ice cream, 5 billion Coca-Cola bottles, and enormous quantities of milk and chocolate. Germany, by comparison, struggled with rationing, shortages, and near-total collapse of consumer production. These openly published numbers demonstrated that America's wartime production exceeded Germany's peacetime economic peaks. Eventually, German prisoners began sending food packages back home rather than receiving them. Using wages earned in camp labor programs, prisoners purchased American chocolate, canned goods, and coffee to mail to starving families in Germany. International Red Cross records confirm that approximately 11 million such parcels were sent during the war years. The symbolism proved devastating for Nazi ideology. Imprisoned German soldiers could feed families more effectively from American camps than Germany itself could provide in freedom. Even wartime rationing in the United States exposed the vast gulf separating the two societies. Americans complained about sugar allowances of roughly £2 monthly per person, more than 3 times the German ration when available. American meat rationing still exceeded what Germans received under normal circumstances. Despite restrictions, Americans consumed about 74 pounds of sugar per capita in 1944, roughly 10 times German consumption. Beyond Coca-Cola, prisoners discovered an entire soft drink industry filled with competing brands like Pepsi-Cola, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, Orange Crush, and countless regional beverages. The existence of multiple companies producing nearly identical products represented market abundance unimaginable under Germany's tightly controlled economy. Bottling plants operated nationwide, producing billions of bottles annually through standardized, efficient systems reaching even small towns. Spring 1945 delivered the final ideological blow. As Allied forces advanced through Germany, prisoners watched newsreels showing American soldiers handing chocolate and chewing gum to German children. Those children reacted with joy to candy their own government could never provide. The contrast became impossible to ignore. American troops fighting deep inside enemy territory still carried enough sweets to distribute freely, while Germany delivered starvation to its own civilians. Films documenting concentration camp liberations showed American soldiers sharing rations with skeletal survivors, displaying compassion even amid unimaginable horror. Between 1945 and 1946, German prisoners returned home to a devastated country. Many had gained considerable weight during captivity while their families had grown dangerously thin. Medical examinations showed that most prisoners returned healthier than when captured. Some carried home final Red Cross packages containing coffee, chocolate, and canned food treasured by entire families. Children who barely remembered chocolate tasted Hershey bars brought back by fathers who had eaten ice cream regularly inside prison camps. Former prisoners unexpectedly became strong supporters of the Marshall Plan. They had personally witnessed an economy based on production and abundance rather than conquest and extraction. They understood that American prosperity was not zero-sum. The realization that Americans possessed enough wealth to rebuild former enemies fundamentally shaped post-war German attitudes toward cooperation and capitalism. West Germany's economic miracle during the 1950s partially grew from lessons learned inside American prison camps. Former prisoners who had observed American mass production, standardization, logistics, and consumer culture applied those ideas to rebuilding Germany. They understood that industrial efficiency could transform luxuries into ordinary products, and that widespread prosperity created political stability more effectively than authoritarian control. The transformation of German prisoners through exposure to American abundance is extensively documented in military archives, Red Cross records, corporate production reports, prisoners' letters, memoirs, and academic research, especially the work of historian Arnold Kramer, widely regarded as the leading authority on German prisoners in America. Kramer concluded that exposure to ordinary American prosperity accomplished what formal re-education programs alone could not: the complete destruction of myths surrounding Nazi superiority. The numbers themselves remain impossible to ignore. Between 1943 and 1946, prisoners typically consumed between 3,300 and 3,600 calories daily. Sugar, milk, soft drinks, meat, and even ice cream were readily available. German civilians during the same period survived on roughly 1,200 to 1,500 calories daily with heavily rationed meat, sugar shortages, almost no soft drinks, and virtually non-existent ice cream. These were not propaganda claims but carefully documented realities. Enemy prisoners often ate far better than German civilians. The influence of American food culture continued long after the war. Coca-Cola returned to West Germany in 1949 as a symbol of alliance and recovery. American-style soda fountains and ice cream parlors appeared across German cities. Supermarkets modeled after American grocery stores spread during the 1950s, often promoted by former prisoners who understood how consumer abundance depended on efficient distribution systems. In numerous post-war interviews, former prisoners consistently identified food abundance as central to their transformation. One former Africa Corps officer explained during a 1975 interview, "We believed America was weak and divided. Then we discovered a country capable of giving ice cream to enemies. That was the moment we understood we had lost more than the war. We had lost our understanding of the world." Another veteran later recalled, "The first Coca-Cola I tasted felt like drinking the future. Sweet, sparkling, unnecessary, and available to anyone for a nickel. It represented everything Nazi Germany failed to be: abundant, joyful, and open." Historians now regard the German prisoner experience in America as one of history's most effective examples of re-education through prosperity rather than coercion. The system succeeded because prisoners learned through observation, not lectures. Every meal demonstrated industrial capacity. Every Coca-Cola bottle represented distribution and standardization. Every ice cream sundae illustrated abundance transformed into ordinary daily life. Children of former prisoners grew up hearing stories about America's unimaginable plenty. Many initially believed these stories exaggerated fantasies, only to discover later that reality matched the descriptions. Supermarkets overflowing with choices, soda fountains serving elaborate sundaes, endless candy selections, these became symbols of a different economic and political philosophy. Over time, the mythology of American abundance shaped entire generations of German-American relations. Today, Coca-Cola is everywhere in Germany. Ice cream is completely ordinary. American fast food chains operate nationwide. The transformation from wartime scarcity to post-war abundance became complete. Yet the deeper lesson remains historically significant: ideologies can sometimes be defeated more effectively through generosity than punishment, through demonstration rather than propaganda. The German prisoners who first encountered Coca-Cola and ice cream in American prison camps witnessed what may have been democracy's most powerful weapon: the ability to create such overwhelming abundance that even enemies could share in it casually. Their story represents one of history's strangest victories: an ideology shattered by soft drinks and frozen desserts, a worldview undone not through cruelty but through prosperity. Former prisoners often remembered specific sensory moments forever: the fizz of their first Coca-Cola, the cold sweetness of ice cream, the taste of a Hershey bar. These memories carried emotional power beyond any political argument. They had experienced democracy through flavor, comfort, and abundance. The transformation proved irreversible. Men who once marched beneath the banners of the Third Reich returned home carrying a radically different understanding of power. America's true strength, they realized, came not merely from military force but from productive capacity so immense it could afford generosity even toward enemies. In the end, the Coca-Cola bottles and ice cream dishes served inside American prison camps accomplished something armies alone rarely achieve: the complete transformation of hearts and minds. The German prisoners who once could not believe such abundance existed became living witnesses to it. They carried home the realization that democracy tasted like chocolate and freedom fizzed like carbonation. Their story remains a reminder that history's greatest victories are not always won through destruction. Sometimes they emerge through generosity, through kindness, through the simple act of serving ice cream to enemies on a hot summer afternoon. The men transformed by American abundance became some of freedom's most unlikely ambassadors, forever changed by the impossible reality of Coca-Cola and ice cream inside American prison camps.